Welcome back to our World Chess Championship Made Simple series, and today we get to see Game 8 in the World Chess Championship between Magnus playing white and Jan playing black. So in Game 8, Jan is behind by 1 point. And that's a problem because he only has a few games left. The match is only 14 games, so he has to catch up in order to have any chance of winning this thing. Now, he was black and he started trying to play for a win, and he really went wild in this game. I'm not going to tell you how it ended, yeah, but you'll find out at the end. Um, we start off with not a Catalan, not a Queen's Gambit, but a Petrov. So Carlsen says, let's play a Petrov. I'm okay with a draw if you are. And if we get a symmetrical position, white is the only one playing for the win, as we'll see in this game. After knight f3, knight f6, we have the Russian game. And d4 is a new line. So they want to try something new this time around. And the whole idea here is if we take, there's an unpleasant e5. Okay, and if you take that pawn, they can kick out the knight first and then collect the guy on e5. So we get this sort of symmetrical position where black is always a tempo behind, right? Black is just going to get the same position, but they're always down one tempo. Jan tries to get rid of the annoying knight because the knight can be really pesky and you don't want him around, especially if they kick out your nice knight. Like let's say you play something like bishop e7 f3 maybe, or maybe they even trade off your knight, and then it's like it's not very comfy because the bishop is looking at your house and you can't look at their house. You can't look at white's house as black, all right? So for that reason, he tries to trade off the strong knight. And knight c6 is not quite as good, right? You can probably see the double pawns are not the gem of your position as black here. So for that reason, he says, how about we trade here? What do you think about this trade? And Carlsen says, okay, deal. It's not like your bishop is very good here either. And in the meantime, can I get rid of your annoying knight in the same exact way? And after the trade, we get this completely symmetrical position. But even though it's symmetrical, don't forget white is up a tempo. He's always first in these positions. And so they're not so easy to play, even though they're symmetrical. Okay, let's say you're careless. Let's say you just play like a normal move. Okay, let's say I castle and you castle, and I play queen h5. I'm just gonna come out and mate you. Okay, and it's not so easy for you to stop me. Because let's say you play g6, right? Okay, queen h6. And with the bishop coming in, rook e1, maybe f4, f5. If, let's say, queen f6, I'm thinking f4 right now. And this could be very tricky because my queen will run back. I have f5 coming up. You can try to copy me, but, it's not so simple for black because they're always meeting white's attack. All right, they're reacting. For that reason, at this point, he tried something really wild. Okay, after White Castle, he tried something really wild. If he didn't want this, by the way, there was a better way to play. So Yam probably should have gone for just queen check. And after queen check, it's not exactly what he wanted because he wanted to play for a win. He doesn't want to trade queens, but it's the only way to get an easy position as black. Because if we trade queens, okay, to be honest, there's nothing here. Nobody can play for a win. Black is just taking out the bishop, casting, and living happily thereafter. Okay? For that reason, he didn't really want to trade queens, even though it would avoid what happened in the game. After, let's say, bishop e3, you try to block it. I can even castle queenside. Then the bishop can come out one day, and everything is fine for black. But that's not what happened in the game. Because in the game, he went for the very wild h5. Okay, instead of playing like a normal person, just castling and trying to defend White's attack, Jan says, "Arr!" and starts going for it. Now, did it help in the game? We'll find out. But after h5, his whole idea with this like nonsensical move is he's gonna push the pawn and try to attack White's king. Okay, the king can hide on f8 or g8 is what Black is saying here. Right? If this was a beginner, I would say, hey, buddy, why are you pushing side pawns? What's wrong with you? That's not following the opening rules. But because it's Jan, usually he knows what he's doing. Here he may go a little bit overboard with h5. Okay, it's taking some risk. Okay, I know you're trying to play for a win, Jan, but is that really the best way to do it? So after check, the whole point is the scary bishop goes off the board. Okay, if you want to attack, you have to play king f8. Okay, unless you want to trade off queens, in which case that's just a silly move, that doing nothing and creating a weakness, right? The whole point of this strategy is to keep queens on the board, maybe push the pawn up to here if we get the chance, and then slide the queen somewhere nice. In a dream world in Fantasyland. Except this is not Fantasyland, and Carlsen is not Fantasy Man. He's not gonna allow us to do all this. In the game, he's just gonna trade off this scary bishop, say what attack? I don't see any attack. Where is the attack? And after the bishop goes off, it turns out the rooks are not having a great time. The king may be safe. That's not the problem. Problem is, how are you connecting these guys? You ever want to play here? Ooh, cheese. Thanks for putting pawns on my favorite color. The bishop is gonna have a picnic with those. Okay, but if you don't want to do that, what do? You want to take out your rooks? Kind of like what happened in the game. But then your rooks can never really come out properly. Okay, he tries to get the rook somewhere useful. White says nope. Pressure, pressure, pressure. You try to bring out the rooks. Ooh, first I'll trade off your rook and then invade. Okay, he can't play this properly. Any endgame is also bad for black because notice that the bishop has the color of this pawn, right? So even if we trade off almost everything apart from the bishops, even that endgame can be good for white. Let's say I put my pawn on h4, get rid of all my rooks, get rid of all the queens, and I go to the pawn endgame. I think white can press because white's gonna play here, put another pawn on the light square, then bring out the king. King is gonna come in, bother these pawns, bother those pawns. It's not so easy for black to play even endgames. As for the middle game, unless Carlsen goes really wrong and lets you checkmate him, the middle game is sufferable. Okay, you're just suffering here. All right. Jan says, "Whoa, okay, let's protect pawns one by one. First, this guy is solid. We got it covered. After the trade, maybe let's go trade queens and let's go to an endgame. This endgame with the rooks. Maybe I'll go trade off my bishops, and that should be okay. It's not the end of the world." And Carlsen likes to keep pressure. He knows he's better in any middle game. He says, "Nope, you can't trade that rook. I like it exactly where he is." Okay? Because the rook is not mating anyone. Again, only in Fantasyland. In some magical world where you got everything you wanted, you can checkmate white. But that's not going to happen. In the actual game, he goes h3 just in case, just to say, okay, I can do whatever I want. I can, make a window, make sure there are no tricks, there's no queen e6, make sure there's no bishop g4, your bishop's limited, and, make sure there is no h3. Make sure you don't mate me with that nail pawn. And Jan said, ooh, my pawn got pretty far. Look, I put the pawn on the light squares for you. So now any endgame is not so bad. Maybe in the endgames I can get to that guy. But Carlsen isn't interested in endgames right now. He says your king is bad, your rook is weird, what's it doing here? Has no squares, and my pieces have defiled. I got the only open highway, and I will be driving down the highway all I like. And Black says, "Ooh, but wait a second, don't you have an isolated pawn? What are you doing with this guy? The guy on, d4? Or maybe in an end game, maybe I can get him, And right now, probably Jan should have just moved the king over. Probably should have tried to bring here the queen here. The rook belongs there. If it's an endgame, it's an endgame. At least this pawn is weak. At least those guys can be weak in some endgames. It's not the end of the world. If they trade, they trade. Again, it's bearable. Okay, it's better to stick with pawn here and just go for the rook endgame. Okay, and this would have been a draw. He would have survived because the king will come here. These pawns are weak. My rook can always come to h6 and say, what's the big deal? I don't see any problems. Okay, my pawn can always come there if needed, and black is okay. But that's not what happens. Out of nowhere, for some very strange reason, Yang goes really wild. Maybe he was angry that his attack wasn't going his way. Maybe he was angry that he's losing the match, and I'm sure he was angry about game 6 that he lost in like 8 hours, and it's just a really devastating game. So out of nowhere, he goes for b5. This is the first time he starts raging, okay? And that doesn't really go well, okay? When you start tilting in a game, which means you get really angry, you don't start playing better moves. You start playing impatient moves. You start playing things like b5, okay? Almost anybody looks at this and it's like, why? Why? What does that even do? What does it get space? Does it make a backward spawn? Is that what it's trying to do? Get yourself a new weakness? And positionally, it's bad. It makes no sense positionally because I can just go here and say, okay, you have a target. Thanks, bud. But tactically, it's even worse because you're just losing everything. You're losing the house. When Carlsen finds Queen A3, I think the game is over because that's a horrible position. Okay. The whole point is after the king runs away, I always collect. And if you take my bishop, I take yours. And that's what Jan missed. After the game, he said, oh, yeah, it was just a blunder. Okay, I'm not sure what he missed, what he was calculating here. Maybe he saw this, which doesn't really work because of, let's say, that or rook e8. I'm not sure what he was thinking about here. Maybe he had some hallucination. Maybe he just didn't see queen a3. It's all possible. Even though usually in a world championship, you expect people to see queen a3, but people have their moments. People have bad moments, they collapse. And that's exactly what happened here. Because after the fork, he's losing one pawn, the bishop is still bad, and it's not just the pawn, yeah? The queen is coming in too. So you try moving your bishop somewhere, ooh, ouch, ouch. And this is gonna get really painful very soon. Okay. White is totally safe. The rook never came in. It's like it was determined to be sidelined on the bench. And he's not just down a pawn, he's also down piece activity. For that very reason, he tried to put up some resistance. So he tries to say, wait a second, I'm covering everything. It's all defended, and your bishop is bad and your pawn is bad. He tries to put some pressure on d4, but not gonna do the trick. You have a weakness on h4. This guy can easily defend d4. Even if he wasn't the world champion Carlsen, I'm sure he can defend d4, attack this guy, and suddenly in any endgame you're losing because not is it just a pawn, it's an outside passed pawn. After b3 and a4, he's just a queen. Plain and simple. Okay, so that's a dangerous pawn. Okay, and if you take with the pawn, you probably get mated because they have the seventh rank and your pawns are in disrepair. It's a broken house. Okay, broken castle, broken house, everything's just falling apart. Jan tries to go into the queen endgame because queen endgames actually give chances of a draw. Even when you're down a pawn, you can hope for something. But the problem is this queen endgame is not exactly what you want, where your queen isn't doing much, your pawns are all over the place. White has space, White's king is safer. He's got three pawns, you only got like one pawn cover, and the queen is more active for White. This is like White gets to have the cake and needed two. Okay. For that very reason, White just says, ooh, target, 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 everything target. All the pawns are split. Once again, that becomes a big deal. Okay. Jan says, maybe I can run away with some attack, maybe. Nope. Even after you get the f2 pawn, it's not so important because I collect with check. That's important. I collect this square with another check, making sure there are no perpetual checks. And I wait because it turns out this check doesn't do anything. You don't have the dark squares anymore. I cover all the important checks to make sure there is no perpetual check on the white king. Okay. And at this point, Magnus just says, you can't take my pawn. And if you want to take that guy, I'll collect this guy, giving me another passer. How many passers do I need to win? Even if I'm not a world champion, one should suffice, and two for sure will suffice. That's more than enough, okay? And at this point, Jan says, maybe you'll forget about G3, E1? Maybe you'll forget about checks? No, not as a world champion. They don't miss this stuff, all right? And after the queen tries for a desperate counterplay, basically going for this pawn and that pawn and making sure white can't go up, we just have to give one accurate check, put the queen behind the pawns, hide from their checks. That's actually very accurate because it stops queen c1, right? So now there are no sneaky checks anywhere, no perpetuals. This is all covered. Okay, so that's end game technique perfection. Okay, he couldn't have played it better if he tried. After check, queen d1, the whole idea is we push the pawn from behind. We push it, and there is no one to block it. If the queen tries to just stay there, we push the pawn, and then oh, choo-choo. At the right moment, we can choo-choo the other one. Okay, the queen can block one, but not the other, and we're up two pawns. Okay, the king can always hide here. No harm will come to him. Okay, for that reason, he resigned in a few moves. Okay, after king h1, the pawn keeps going up. Jan says, "Ooh, take my pawn. Give me some hope." Okay, if the queen takes, maybe there is some hope. Maybe it's a draw because after queen check, it's not so easy, right? There are always chances to survive, always hope. Okay, but after pawn takes, hope is leaving because the last pawn tries to create some tricks, tries to create some checks, but after queen f3, the checks are over. King h2 and no more good checks. Queen g3, game over. Okay, and that's why he resigned after queen f3. So what happened in this game? Basically, Jan tried to go wild. Jan tried to go for the attack as black, which is really hard when it's a symmetrical position. Okay, he tries to unbalance things, tries to make it exciting and attacking rather than just technical, but that backfired pretty badly. And then the blunder on b5 really didn't help. Okay. On that note, it'll be interesting to see how he recovers after the rest day, which is today. All right. Looking forward to that, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.